Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ and welcome to your detailed forecast update for December 22nd, 2024, the official longest day of the year for Australia. It's looking like it's going to be a fine run up towards Christmas as well. We'll recap on the heavy rainfall that's fallen across far northern Queensland and just give a bit of a flood update on up there. We've got severe thunderstorms on the cards into the new year period around the southeastern corner of Queensland. We'll talk about the general weather outlook across interior parts of Australia under the impacts of those heat waves, and then two tropical lows and one forecasted in the Coral Sea and one over the waters of Western Australia. All of that plus more coming up in today's for the forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing. But let's get stuck straight into things today with the remnants of this system over here in the Coral Sea. So this is tropical low 06U, and that's been the system that's been causing all of the rainfall problems across the far north of Queensland. And when I say all of the rainfall problems, we're talking about the verified observations now of 900 millimeters outside of Proserpine. They were just too high for me to believe in yesterday's forecast update, but they are verified, and there's a lot of other personal weather stations especially that have picked up similar observations between the 700 and 900 millimeter mark outside of Proserpine, and it's just because of that rain funnel that came into that area. Unfortunately, that was a very difficult forecast to predict, and as such, my forecast and a lot of other ones completely missed there. Where we didn't miss was around the Townsville, Ingham and Cardwell area, and then up towards Innisfail and Tully. The rainfall there was very much predictable, and it came through pretty much exactly how we were expecting as well. The majority of this rainfall is now clearing out into the Coral Sea. It still remains heavy around where the thunderstorms are, but you can see it's well out to sea at this time, impacting areas around the Willis Island and Flinders Reef area, but it is heading further and further out to sea, and this system is steadily weakening. Still a little bit of moderate to heavy showers around the Atherton tablelands, especially adjacent to Rainfall, they could be getting a bit of heavy rainfall at the time of making this video. You can see accumulations out there still around that 30 to 40 millimeter an hour mark. The rainfall there is expected to continue throughout the course of today. In fact, it will intensify throughout this afternoon and evening, where we could be seeing a bit of a thunderstorm outbreak across the far north of Queensland, and that does have me concerned in terms of the reasons why all of these rivers are kind of flowing at or above their minor flooding alerts at this time, some of them even up towards some moderate flooding alerts. And if you get 50 millimeters in 30 minutes from thunderstorms, which over in far north Queensland, that is still a small amount of rainfall and can happen pretty much at any time with no notice, that could cause some substantial flooding problems. So we will need to keep a very close eye on the radar this afternoon and evening. And if you do live in a flood prone area in the far north of Queensland, especially into the Atherton tablelands, and the rivers adjacent to your location are already running quite high, then make sure you're not letting your guard down right now, because these thunderstorms, they could provide a little bit of trouble later on this afternoon and evening. In terms of the risk of severe thunderstorms, it's not looking that high. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of storms went warned for severe, or severe warned for the heavy rainfall. I don't think large hailstones or damaging winds is a threat. They're going to be really slow moving, the majority of these thunderstorms, so not expecting too much in the way of the wind threat or these thunderstorms impacts being too widespread. But I do expect these thunderstorms to provide plenty of rainfall to already saturated locations across the far north of Queensland, and again supported by the convective forecast models as well. You can see some big rain swathes expected to develop later on tonight, especially into this evening when these thunderstorms dramatically upscale. I think the Axis G3 forecast for the North Queensland area, the convective forecast, might be a little bit of a cluster of boogies at this time, but we will keep a close eye on things. I think the rainfall here is just a little bit too north focused, but there's certainly some good falls that are expected around not only the Cooktown area, but then further south into the southeast of Queensland. Rainfall accumulations not looking to be too high for the remainder of today. Should be under 50 millimeters, definitely under about 75 millimeters, depending on what showers come through, but the majority of places are going to remain high and dry throughout the course of today. So again, don't get your hopes up for any further rainfall. If you do desperately need it, it is going to be from thunderstorms, so it will be very unpredictable, and then any further rainfall for already saturated areas, that's not necessarily a good thing either. In terms of rainfall for the central Queensland coastline, yes, there are a few showers now, but they are dwindling down, and they will be easing off pretty much completely throughout the course of today and into tomorrow. That will be good, because they do need a couple of days of dry weather to really let those river levels settle. I think the Bruce Highway between Townsville and Bowen, that got flooded out yesterday, I know that for a fact, but I think it is now reopened, or at least in some locations reopened. But again, drive very safely, and another shower could cause some major flooding in those areas, so they're really on the edge throughout the course of today. Any moderate to heavy rainfall, which looks really unlikely at this time, but further north in terms of thunderstorms, anywhere north of Townsville does have that chance of some heavier thunderstorms and downpours later on today. When those thunderstorms do roll around, that's when we do get those substantial flooding concerns. So again, we do need to take things very seriously with the rainfall forecast up in the central Queensland coastline as well. Tropical low 06U, though, it is a dying system. I mean, compared to where it was at yesterday, it is an elongated low pressure system, basically a remnant low at this time, and it is certainly on its final legs. It's in its final stages of life and will continue to die out over the next couple of hours before heading deeper down into the Coral Sea. It will be enhanced swells throughout the course of tomorrow and into Tuesday as well, well for the central Queensland into the southeastern Queensland coastline. So surfing conditions, they might be pretty good actually in the lead up to Christmas, especially with the warmer and sunnier weather that we are expecting across the southeastern and the central corners of Queensland. So that might be a little bit of good stuff down there, but in terms of the strength of this system, it's probably not going to be strong enough to produce those big swells, and big waves are also not really expected either from this weather system. It's been an interesting one. It's been a really good run actually for this system. It did much better than expected, and I think there's very valid reasoning to call this a strong tropical low. It did actually get quite close to cyclone status just in terms of the peak wind speeds, and in terms of rainfall, I mean 1,000 millimeters coming through, that's not unheard of from tropical lows, but that is still some very heavy rainfall, and I think there are a lot of people underestimating just the severity of this system and how much damage it has caused in terms of flooding. It's not a catastrophe, it's nothing that's going to declare a state of emergency in Queensland, but it is still a really strong system and was very appropriate to take things very seriously, not only in the forecast but also for the preparations of this system. If you have enjoyed the coverage on it and you'd like to see more, then please do consider subscribing, but this is going to be the last bulletin on this system unless something dramatic happens throughout the course of today and into tomorrow. But in terms of Tropical O06U, that is it. We are done and dusted. Let's head down into the southeastern corner of Queensland now. We do have a bit of a revisal that we need to make with the severe thunderstorm forecast. We're going to do that in today's forecast update. There is a chance of some showers and storms here and there into the northeast of New South Wales, extending into the southeast of Queensland later on this afternoon and evening. In terms of their severity, it's likely that they're going to be non-severe thunderstorms. Nothing too crazy is expected. They will be pretty isolated as well, contrary to what this forecast is suggesting, but we're only looking for kind of the red and the purple globs on this forecast here. But they will be isolated around the Stanthorpe, Warwick rather, and then the Wollongong area in this general area of the northeast of New South Wales. A couple could extend into the southeast of Queensland, but it's not looking too likely at this time. So again, don't get your hopes up for thunderstorm activity, and certainly don't get your hopes up for severe thunderstorm activity either. Certainly could be a couple of decent blow-ups later on this afternoon, but they will very quickly collapse in on themselves by the looks of things. Same deal for tomorrow afternoon as well. A couple of thunderstorms here and there extending up towards Toowoomba and Chinchilla. Again, I wouldn't expect anything crazy from them. And then Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday throughout the Christmas period looking high and dry. It's until Friday and Saturday when we start to see a couple of thunderstorms fire up again. The chance of severe thunderstorms doesn't look too flash on Friday. There could be a couple here and there out towards St George, Roma, Thallin and Goondiwindi, but if you're looking out for significant severe thunderstorms, I wouldn't hold your breath for Friday. We will need to come back to the forecast on Friday though and have a look at what is expected. So both Saturday and Sunday, nothing too crazy expected, just a couple of thunderstorms here and there, and then Monday is the day that's kind of got my head turned just in terms of how much the forecast has been enhanced for those thunderstorms that we are expecting to kind of form a severe thunderstorm outbreak on Monday. So kind of adjacent to the scenic rim and then some of the mountains driving up the Sunshine Coast up to through Gympie and then up to about Mount Perry, and on the western side of that we'll likely see a bit of a thunderstorm outbreak powered by a low pressure trough and a weak low pressure system that's going to sit just inland. Not only are we going to see some very warm temperatures throughout the course of Monday up into the high 30s or early 40s, and it will be a humid one as well, so those heat indexes are going to be quite high, but with plenty of instability in the atmosphere, not quite the UV index, but the instability forecast rather, you can see plenty of instability in the atmosphere. Thunderstorms will have a pretty good setup to really develop here. There's going to be two hotspots extending between Toowoomba and Kingaroy, and then further inland out towards Chinchilla and Eddersvoid. There'll be a bit of a dry spot between Chinchilla and then out towards Roma, and in June we'll likely see another severe thunderstorm outbreak out here in Queensland, self-proclaimed Thunderstorm Alley, and then extending down into the northern parts of New South Wales around Thallin and then up towards Rolleston. We'll likely see some good thunderstorms as well. So kind of two zones or two separate zones of thunderstorms separated by the dry line that's going to be sitting somewhere in the middle of here. These thunderstorms likely to be very slow moving throughout the course of Monday as well, and as such some heavy rainfall is expected to develop from these severe thunderstorms if they do go severe warned. And then throughout the course of Tuesday, nothing really that crazy expected. We could be seeing thunderstorms carrying some heavier rainfall across the northeast of New South Wales. If they do go severe warned for severe warned thunderstorms, it will be for the heavy rainfall, but again it doesn't look overly likely at this time. Convective available potential energy values looking really good for thunderstorms further inland out towards Goondiwindi and then up towards Roma and Injune once again, but the forecast models haven't really pounced on that forecast yet. But just by the looks of things, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, which is New Year's Eve into New Year's Day in 2025, we could be seeing a couple of thunderstorms celebrate, dampening some of the evening celebrations further out inland into the central and the coalfields region of Queensland. So again, we will need to keep a very very close eye on these thunderstorms here. It doesn't look overly likely that they're going to cause significant problems. I mean, the Axis G3 really not calling for much on their forecast either in terms of the way of severe thunderstorms, but I would definitely be expecting a bit of an outbreak to happen sometime on New Year's Eve. Just having a look at this forecast here, the Axis G3 really supporting a couple of good thunderstorms into the northeastern corner of New South Wales, but then again we will need to check back in on this forecast over the remainder of this week because we're looking now 10 days out into the future. And then into the first part, or basically the first week of 2025, we did say that we were going to have to wait probably until the second week of 2025 to see proper severe thunderstorms develop once again into the southeast of Queensland, but it looks like they're well and truly developing on New Year's Day and then into the 2nd, 3rd and 4th day of January. So we will need to keep a close eye on this forecast, like I've said for the nth time, this forecast update in the last couple of minutes, but again, a lot can change over the coming couple of days, and it is very important that we keep checking back in on the forecast. And if this kind of stuff does take your fancy, then make sure you are subscribed. And just up into the central and the far northern reaches of Queensland, back there again into 2025, it looks like they might have a bit of a rainfall event develop. It looks like an onshore flow is going to develop from a very broad low pressure system in the Coral Sea, and this has been supported by a number of forecast models over the last couple of days, and the long range forecast has already been suggesting it for quite a while. You can see both the GFS forecast and then into the Eastern Blue as well, expecting some substantial rainfall accumulations to materialise once again Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. The first couple of days of 2025 could be a bit wet, especially into the end of the first week of 2025, as well as some rainfall really pipes up into the Coral Sea and then along the Coral Sea coastline. So we will need to watch this forecast very closely. You guessed my words just then, I bet. But yeah, we'll have a look at this again in the future. There could be quite a bit of rainfall here. It's very hard to put an accurate number on how much rainfall is expected, but if I was to go just kind of off gut feeling what's already fallen, probably about 2 to 250 millimeters is expected into the first week of 2025, provided this rainfall does remain on the forecast as well. I mean, things can change dramatically over the next couple of days. We will need to keep checking back in on the forecast. It is just a waiting and seeing kind of game here. The GFS forecast model really going quite bullish on the rainfall here, and it shows in their 14-day rainfall accumulations, rather. I keep calling it 10-day rainfall accumulations, and I apologise for that in advance. Even though the GFS is not actually a high-resolution forecast model, it's still calling for what I would class as substantial rainfall accumulations for the GFS. I mean, normally for the GFS, you've got to multiply the rainfall accumulations by about a power of 4 to get the actual number here, but you can see the Eastern Blue also piping up some decent rainfall along the coastline between Gladstone up to about Mackay, about 120 millimeters here. Again, you got to take it with a very heavy pinch of salt, and things can change dramatically on the forecast, but at this time it does look like some good rainfall is set in stone almost for the central Queensland coastline once again, giving for the far northern Queensland coastline around Townsville and Ingham a bit of a miss after the torrential rainfall that they've just experienced. So it'll be good to kind of shake things up, especially if Rockhampton and Gladstone can get some good rainfall. They do desperately need it down there, and it looks like that's kind of where the rainfall is headed. We're making a forecast or a bit of a hunch about 14 days out into the future though, so again, a lot can change over the coming couple of days. The remainder of the tropics looking pretty wet actually across Western Australia and then into the Northern Territory. There isn't an awful lot of rainfall being spread out across either state or territory, but you can see plenty of rainfall expected to be concentrated in the Kimberley region, then into the northwestern corner of the Northern Territory as well. And of course, that is just from evening thunderstorms, very persistent in the lead up to Christmas and then into the lead up to New Year's. And as you probably have guessed it by now, right through the first week of 2025. These thunderstorms typical for this time of the year, of course, but they can cause some rainfall, some significant rainfall accumulation. And you can see it over the 10-day or the 14-day rainfall observations, rather. Some substantial rainfall accumulations have been now forecasted, especially across the Kimberley region, where we're going to be looking at rainfall accumulations in excess of 200 millimeters across some of these places here. And then once we get into the northern areas of the Northern Territory, accumulations up to about 150 to 200 millimeters there. Darwin expecting about 120 millimeters. But yeah, some really good falls all round expected across parts of Western Australia and then into the Northern Territory. And some good falls also expected into the Pilbara region as well, just from showers and thunderstorms. They're going to make themselves prevalent between the Christmas and the New Year's period. Those thunderstorms are going to slide down a little bit throughout Saturday and Sunday, the 28th and 29th of December, and they'll provide some much needed rainfall once again into the Pilbara region, just keeping on topping up the rivers there and making things very green. The desert already starting to go very green in the Pilbara and some of the interior parts of Western Australia. Now, what is going to hamper the hopes of the green lovers across the interior parts of Australia is just this temperature forecast. I mean, it's about to get brutally hot, especially over in the west. Perth expecting to top of 42 degrees today, and it is going to be a stinker with this low-pressure trough, the west coast trough extending down the west coast of WA, and as such, those temperatures are going to be pulled down from the interior regions, reaching up to about 46 or 47 inland from Kalbarri and Northampton, and then 40 degrees expected for Perth on this forecast here, but the northern suburbs could go into the mid-40s, 41, 42 or 43, and then outside of Jurien Bay and up towards Morawa and Mora, temperatures up to about 45 degrees expected, so very, very warm indeed, and those temperatures are not going to stop climbing until about 4 p.m. this afternoon, until that sea breeze finally kicks in for Perth. It's going to be even warmer for some of these locations on Monday, 44 degrees expected in Gingin, but it looks like a bit of a sea breeze might be the saving grace of the Perth area. Still a top of 42 degrees expected, but it's going to be an earlier maximum, sometime between 11 and 12 o'clock, and as such you can probably make a pretty good guess that it is going to be a scorcher of a night. 31 degrees Celsius going down to tonight based off this forecast model here by midnight. It does get a little bit cooler as the night draws on by early morning. By the time that easterly kicks in, it's probably going to be about 28 or 29, but again, it is going to be a stinking hot day and a very hot night as well across the Perth metro area. 30 degrees overnight. That is very uncomfortable stuff, and you can see just based off the convective forecast model as well that those temperatures are going to skyrocket as soon as that sun rises. The Axis convective model expecting an overnight minimum of 27 degrees at 6 a.m, and then those temperatures rapidly skyrocketing once that sun rises. Already 32 degrees by 8 o'clock, and probably going to get very warm very quickly as the day drags on. So Perth well and truly in an extreme heatwave conditions at this time, and that heatwave warning very much valid. Sometimes I get a little bit, why are they being issued, especially across interior parts of Australia where they used that 45 degrees for recurring days, but there's certainly a valid one now across Western Australia. It is going to be one of the hottest weeks of the year. Warm again for the 23rd, warm again for the 24th, and then very warm again across interior parts of WA, especially into the eastern half of the state, and then into South Australia for Christmas Day. Going to be a much cooler top of 22 for Perth. You can see Adelaide expecting a top of 34 for Christmas. South Australia is going to be dominated by some of those warmer temperatures on Christmas Day. You can see Maralinga a top of 43, and then out towards Nullarbor about 45 or 46. So they're used to that kind of temperature, but it is going to be a very warm Christmas out there, a white Christmas based off this forecast, just considering how hot it's going to be. And further up into the Northern Territory, very warm for Alice Springs and Tennant Creek, Docker River as well, tops into the early 40s there. Darwin a bit cooler, around 32 or 31. Then over into the eastern parts of the nation, Queensland looking very warm across the western half of Queensland, and then along the central coastline, a little bit of rainfall expected to extend up to Townsville, a top of 29 for Townsville on Christmas Day. Brisbane a bit cooler, at top of 28, nothing in the way of rainfall really expected for Brisbane either. Sydney a very cool top of 24, but it looks like it's going to get a little bit warmer as you get further inland. Some of the western suburbs could get up to about 32 or 33 degrees, so it will be quite warm out there. The heat really extending across New South Wales as well, into the mid to high 30s across interior parts of New South Wales, about stock standard for this time of the year, and it's going to get warm across Victoria as well. Melbourne top of 28, Mildura top of 36. It's going to be a humid one for Melbourne as well, and that heat is just going to keep building throughout Boxing Day. You can see Boxing Day just in time for the Boxing Day test for Melbourne. It is going to be a very warm one indeed, as a slow pressure system that brings the showers to WA for Christmas Day sweeps across into the Bight and then impacts the eastern seaboard on the 26th, and you can see that brings that very warm air through Victoria. Mildura top of 42 degrees, Melbourne top of 38. In fact, it could get a little bit warmer than that across Melbourne. You can see some of the more interior and then the northern suburbs expect a top higher into the 39 or 40 degree ballpark, so it is going to get quite warm in the Melbourne metro area, and then into the suburbs, of course. That heat is going to be dragged down into Tasmania as well. 26 degrees for Boxing Day. It's going to be a little bit cooler there. 18 degrees expected for Christmas Day. But yeah, those temperatures are going to be very warm. Swept off later on the 26th by a cool change, and you can see temperatures expected to be a lot more milder on Friday and then into Saturday as well. But yeah, this heat wave really is about to extend across interior parts and then across into the eastern seaboard of Australia as well, and it's about to get very warm indeed. And let me tell you, I mean, I'm over at Rottnest Island, adjacent to the West Australian coastline right now. It is a lot cooler over here, but it is still quite warm. Making this video at 5 o'clock, the sun is shining very bright at this time. It is very warm indeed already. Certainly is going to be a warm day in Perth, and I'm feeling for a lot of Perth people it is going to be uncomfortable over there. And just before this video wraps up, I'd like to give a little talk about the tropical lows expected offshore from Western Australia. We might get a very weak one in the run-up to the New Year's period. Again, nothing really expected for the West Australian coastline, but we will see this spin up here south of the Indonesian island of Java. Nothing in the way of tropical cyclone genesis really expected, at least on this forecast model either, and the GFS also not calling for anything. Nothing in the way of impacts either for Western Australia, but it certainly looks like some tropical low activity is possible offshore from Western Australia sometime into the into the dying days of 2024 and into the beginnings of 2025, and then maybe we might get a tropical wave jump off the West Australian coastline sometime into the first week or the second week of 2025, but I wouldn't really get your hopes up. Some forecast models have been suggesting it. The GFS forecast model has since dropped it from its forecast, so tropical cyclone impacts not expected along anywhere of Western Australia's coastline for at least the next 2 weeks at this time. And then that Coral Sea system that we're we've just had Tropical O06U, that's dying off right now, and we were expecting, or we weren't really expecting, but we had the forecast models expecting a system to develop sometime on Boxing Day into the Coral Sea. That has since been completely eradicated from the forecast. The Axis G3 is still really fond of it, especially something developing around Vanuatu on Boxing Day, but they've also since dropped that from their forecast, which is good to see considering it was just never going to happen. And then later on into 2024 and into the beginnings of 2025, we did see rumblings recently of a bit of a tropical low spinning up into the Solomon Sea and a bit of an enhanced energy period to develop around there, but again, that has since been carved from the forecast. So we will wait and see what happens here. Again, for Queensland, nothing expected in terms of tropical low or tropical cyclone impacts for the next 2 weeks at least. And if I had to guess, I mean, just going by how things are going for Queensland, I don't think they're going to see tropical cyclone activity before the 15th of January at least at this time, and definitely not tropical low activity until then either. Same deal for Western Australia. There's not much on the long range forecast, so it looks like we're going to have to be waiting the better part of a month until something pipes up offshore from Western Australia or Queensland, or even into the Northern Territory as well. It's been a much slower than expected start to cyclone season. There have been a couple of systems that have had really good shots of developing, but they just haven't capitalised on it. Same deal with 06U. I mean, that if that had an extra 12 to 24 hours, that, mark my words, would have become a tropical cyclone offshore from Queensland. It just didn't have enough time. So there's certainly been the energy there and the tropical lows there. They just haven't materialised as of yet. But anyways, I've talked for long enough today. Again, I hope I've slowed this video down enough for the majority of people to understand, and that was the top comment on yesterday's forecast update. If you have enjoyed it, then please do leave a like as well, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But that is all from me today. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.